In 2001, a couple named Charlie Burrell and Isabella stood on the edge of 3,500 acres of exhausted farmland in West Sussex, England, land that Burrell's family had owned for over 200 years, and made a decision that their neighbors thought was insane. They stopped farming. They removed every internal fence. They broke up the Victorian drainage systems that had been channeling water off the fields for a century. They released herds of free-roaming longhorn cattle, Exmoor ponies, Tamworth pigs, and 3 species of deer onto the land. And then they did the one thing that no one in British agriculture could believe. They stepped back and let nature take over. By 2025, ecological surveys conducted across the estate, now known as the Kippy Wildland, documented recovery that even the project's own founders had not imagined possible. Breeding bird numbers had increased by 916%. Nightingale territories had risen from 9 singing males in 1999 to 62, a 500% increase on an estate that had recorded just 1 nightingale territory in its 2005 baseline survey. Turtle dove numbers, a species that has declined by 98% across Britain, had risen 600%, making Kep possibly the only piece of land in the country where their numbers are going up. Butterfly species richness had doubled. Dragonfly and damselfly abundance had increased by 871%. The estate now holds one of the largest populations of purple emperor butterflies in the United Kingdom, with 283 individuals counted in a single day in 2025. White storks bred successfully at KP in 2020, the first time the species had nested in Britain since 1416. By 2024, 53 chicks fledged from the colony. Beavers were reintroduced in 2022. All 5 species of British owl now breed on the estate, along with 13 of the country's 18 bat species, including 2 of the rarest. What was 25 years ago a failing commercial farm that Isabella described as a biological desert is now one of the most significant biodiversity hotspots in Britain. And the method that produced it cost less than the farming it replaced. This is that story. This is the full story. From the financial collapse that forced a 200-year-old family farm to abandon conventional agriculture to the radical ecological theory that suggested an alternative to what 25 years of monitoring data are now revealing about what happens when you return large herbivores to exhausted European farmland and let natural processes run without human direction. Most videos about reeing show you a pretty landscape and call it progress. This one follows the data 25 years deep into the soil biology, the breeding bird transects, the butterfly surveys, the carbon sequestration measurements, the white stork reintroduction that brought a species back to Britain after a 600-year absence, and the scientific evidence that is only now quantifying what happens when you stop managing land and start letting animals manage it instead. Every claim in this video is sourced from NEPAT's official monitoring program, the 2026 two-decade ecological review, and the NEP Wildland Carbon Project by Queen Mary University of London. This is not speculation. This is what 25 years of systematic field surveys actually document. But before you can understand what is happening at Kep now, you need to understand what the land looked like before and why the decision to stop farming it was not idealism. It was desperation. For Americans, the scale of what happened at Kep requires a specific frame of reference. Britain is a small, intensively farmed country. Nearly 70% of its land is agricultural. The average British farm is roughly 215 acres, less than a third of the size of the average American farm. KP at 3,500 acres is large by British standards, roughly 5.5 square miles, but by American standards, it is a single mid-sized ranch. What makes NEP extraordinary is not its size. It is what happened on that small piece of ground when the owners stopped fighting the soil and let the animals take over. Charlie Burrell inherited the estate in 1985 at the age of 21. It was a conventional dairy and arable farm with winter wheat, barley, oats, maize, and a herd of dairy cattle working heavy-wheeled clay soil that had never been naturally productive. The clay was cold, wet, and stubborn. Yields were consistently below national averages. The farm survived on subsidies, not profit. Burrell spent 15 years trying to make it work, investing in new equipment, trying new crop rotations, and draining fields more aggressively. By 2000, the estate was losing serious money. The economics of industrial farming on marginal English clay had reached a dead end. But here is what makes the K&P story different from a simple farm closure. Burrell and Tree did not sell the land. They did not convert it to housing development. They did not plant it with commercial forestry. Instead, they looked at what the land was doing, failing at agriculture, and asked a question that almost no one in British farming was asking in 2001. What would this land do if we stopped telling it what to be? Later in this video, you will see exactly what the land decided to become when the animals were released and the fences came down. The speed and scale of the ecological transformation is unlike anything British conservation had documented on former farmland. But first, you need to understand the theory that made KP possible, because without it, the project would have had no scientific foundation and no chance of approval. The intellectual engine behind KEP is a hypothesis proposed by a Dutch ecologist named Frans Vera in his 2000 book Grazing Ecology and Forest History. Vera's argument was radical, and for many ecologists, heretical. The conventional view of European ecology holds that the natural landscape of lowland Europe before human agriculture was closed canopy forest. Remove humans, the thinking goes, and the trees take over. Vera disagreed. He argued that prehistoric Europe was not a closed forest, but a dynamic mosaic of open grassland, scrub, and woodland maintained not by humans, but by large herbivores. Aurochs, wild horses, elk, deer, and wild boar. The megafauna that roamed Europe for hundreds of thousands of years kept the landscape open through grazing, browsing, trampling, and rooting. They created clearings. They maintained grasslands. They opened the canopy, and in doing so, they generated the kind of habitat complexity that supports the highest levels of biodiversity, not the deep, dark, closed forest that most ecologists assumed was the European default. Vera's hypothesis was controversial. It still is. But Burrell and Tree saw something in it that no one else had tried to test at scale in Britain. If you put large herbivores back onto exhausted farmland and remove the fences, the drainage, and the management, if you let the animals create the landscape instead of humans designing it, what happens?